Welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every show, we talk to the experts to get their ever-changing advice? No, to get their advice on the ever-changing digital social marketing landscape. This show is no different. You can also tell that I don't use a teleprompter or a script. All right, Will Kelly, producer Will, of course, thanks to Furker and Will for all their help on this program. I know the last time we chatted, Will, we were wrapping up what was 2021. Tatiana, the first guest in 2022, I believe, right?
Yeah, we kind of backfilled 2021, which is strange that is to say out loud. And then we're just kind of ramping up now for 22.
All right, so we jump into the 70s, ever so closer to 100, the century mark. I will go to you for some, is it 70, number 70 sports or 70-year-olds?
Yeah, I don't know how this happened. We have a slight issue where this is episode 79, but we're on number 78. I think we had like a double episode or something in there.
This is 78?
I think the one with Devin, we actually skipped the intro and outro. So
got it.
We're on number 78, but it's
very confusing. All the mini pods, the panels don't count as numbers. I mean,
a lot of different verticals. I will tell you 78 isn't great. I will.
This is sports?
Yeah, I'll read you the folks here. Anthony Munoz, Art Shell, Bruce Smith, Jackie Slater, and Dwight White. Great.
You know what's funny is I never really thought about this, but some of these older guys, I don't know if they've been canceled. Maybe they said something, and and then you call by the podcast. You got to look out for me, Will. Make sure you don't put anybody up there. Art Shell is a Pittsburgh fame, right? Am I tripping there or no?
Yeah, I believe Art Shell is a Pittsburgh name. To be honest, they're only showing Anthony Munoz, who was a Bengals guy.
All right. Well, next time, let's do ages, huh? Because 79 is probably going to be even worse. So the Art Cell podcast, I suppose. All right. So moving on. We are going to be talking to Tatiana Simonian. She is a CMO over at Airtime, but she has an amazing career, a resume, if you will, right? Social media strategy at Disney back in 2010. She was pre-IPO at Twitter, head of music from 2011 to 2013. Then she goes to head of global partnerships at Tumblr, global head of category marketing at Amazon Music, and now she's a CMO of Airtime. So a perfect example of, people that have been on the show before, right? That they started off as a social media manager or a strategist, and they've moved all the way up now to a CMO of a major startup. Airtime, if you guys don't know what it is, it's really if you combine Instagram and Clubhouse together, that's what Airtime's trying to do. It's a new kind of social app. Founded by Sean Parker. So you guys all know Sean Parker with his background with Facebook and Napster and all that. They are working on that. It's currently in beta. We'll talk a little bit about that. But also, you guys have all probably seen this article come across your feeds back in December, The Great Resignation, The Great Exhaustion. So she actually wrote a Medium piece. And Will, you were talking about this too. I know it got like 6,000 upvotes on Medium, but the original tweet got a ton of retweets and likes as well.
Yeah, if you go just on her Twitter feed, some of the most recent ones are all, verified blue check people that are like, please read this article. It's so good. It's so good. So she definitely knocked it out of the park.
I mean, we could talk a lot about marketing, which we usually do on this show, and especially with her background, but I do want to get into leadership, what the Great Resignation, what's happening there, how we treat our employees and how we can empower our teams as we all are working hard. And, I joked with a colleague earlier that March 2020, Will, feels like it was 2 months ago, but also feels like it was 5 years ago. So we've all been going through it. So I would love to get her thoughts on that and much, much more. Excited to talk to Tatiana, the CMO over at Airtime. All right, she is the CMO of Airtime. Tatiana Simonian joins us on the Business of Social. Tatiana, I was telling you before the show, great look with the yellow shirt. I like it. And welcome.
Had to bring up pop.
I'm so excited. I know our mutual friend Tatiana Holyfield. I've never met a Tatiana I don't like. So I mean, listen, this is going to go well. But she's I appreciate the intro from her, and I know we both have a relationship with Tatiana, who's been on the show as well. But I would love for you to start off with. I know you have an amazing career from Disney to Nielsen to Tumblr, but can you speak a little bit about what you do over at Airtime and kind of what your day-to-day looks like?
So I am Chief Marketing Officer of Airtime, which is a consumer social platform that was founded by Sean Parker, who created Napster, was the first president of Facebook. I always joke Justin Timberlake in Social Network.
Yep.
What's
Great
funny
role.
is I don't think he would get mad if I said this, but he actually told me that he never met him and they just created the character without knowing him because he's actually a very nice person.
Interesting.
So that was a little bit of dramatic license.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I lead multiple divisions of our marketing organization. So we have community marketing, content marketing, growth marketing, and product marketing under my helm. But my career really started in tech on the social side. So 17 years ago, early days of Friendster and MySpace coding. Through that, I wound up working for the Smashing Pumpkins, running their social media in the very early days of my career. Then I helped develop the social strategy for Hot Topic, and then led social for Disney Music Group. And then I was recruited by Twitter to be their head of music. And I was the first music hire in the history of social media. So I helped to build out that partnerships team pre-IPO for Twitter. Then was VP at Branded Entertainment at Nielsen, went to Tumblr for multiple years, leading global entertainment. And most recently, I led 3 marketing divisions at Amazon Music. And then, like most people who work at Amazon, I left and took some time off to rest. And now I'm here helping build a really awesome platform that is all about presence and not being disconnected.
That's awesome. We've had so many people on the show. I'm thinking like Lindsay Skidmore over NBC Sports, Katie Daly, VP of Social at ESPN, that started off like you, right? Like, I love the quote, the social media manager today is the CMO of tomorrow. And you actually are living that because you started so early in your career kind of doing the grunt work or probably helping with blogs and, like you said, MySpace coding or what have you. And now you find yourself at the very top of the organization. How is that, like, I guess, that whole journey been for you? Because, I mean, you start off when everybody, you're your ugly stepchild in the room, if you will. Nobody listens to you. You're not important. But now it's like, hey, most companies are social first, and they need that person that's been in the game for 10 years that has been just beating up that algorithm their entire career.
Well, speaking to your audience, every social media manager has this sense of feeling both underestimated and underappreciated while dealing with ridiculous demands like make it viral. Or dealing with like chief executives who always are on that next tip, like, should we do an NFT? Like what, it's like and so what happens is the
big thing I hear now is my daughter's on TikTok. Can we launch that? Like,
never heard.
Porn. Yeah.
But what's interesting is that because you have to manage expectations both up, across, and down, it makes people who work in social highly adaptable, which is a great trait in a CMO. You want someone who is highly adaptable. You also, working in social and building your career in marketing upwards through the ranks of social requires you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's really moving. One of the things that I like to say in the space of consumer social is that you have to move at the speed of culture.
Yeah.
And for me, what that looks like today is I don't actually influence our day-to-day social strategy extremely hard.
Right.
We have an amazing gal on my team named Tara, who we found because she built a TikTok on her own that grew to 150,000 followers. Mm-hmm. She probably knows more about current social today in many ways than I do. And I'm able to know what I don't know. And so I think that, for anyone out there who's listening, who is feeling really unappreciated and just know that if you pay your dues.
I've been saying that for you. Yeah.
There's a light at the end. I mean, I feel like it's a very Gen X thing to say because we were always told pay your dues. But I do think one thing that's gone lost through millennials and Gen Zs is they've seen so many folks just turn into overnight sensations that when it doesn't happen to them, they think they are failing. And the reality is just keep at it, keep at the grind, and it will pay off.
Yeah, a quick example for my agency, STN. So I started back in April 2013. No video on Instagram, no video on Facebook. Nobody would really give us a time of day. And even honestly, it's been kind of like a 9-year overnight success because of COVID, honestly. I mean, we've hired 45 people in the last 12 months because every major brand's like, oh, shit. We kind of need to take this social thing serious. We may be out of business in 5 years, right? Like it's no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have. So I totally agree. It's like you weren't taken serious for so long, but now I've seen this tide turn where maybe it would have took 5 or 6 years, but now it's like today because of COVID and because, as you know, as a CMO, all those traditional marketing levers were pulled away from us during the pandemic.
I mean, that's completely it. I'm sort of not always a glass half full kind of person, but I will say it's been so interesting to see how much innovation has come about because of the pandemic. I mean, for our product as well, it's like social to me is still the most powerful top of funnel driver that any brand has. And it is the opportunity to also really create a voice for your brand and differentiate it. I think it's one of the things that we did at Twitter really, really well in those early days. Like there was a character and a personality at Twitter. There was the fail whale and there's a blue bird and there was
fail whale. I forgot about that.
Remember that? And then the @Twitter account had a voice and had a point of view. And that wasn't the case for a lot of brands back then. And now it is. People will be like, did you see Steakums is tweeting about like policy? It's super fascinating now that, or even the way that gal from TikTok, Emily Zugay, came in and was like creating those hilarious designs and then brands started using them. Yeah. I love that. Like what a great way to capitalize on a moment and strike fast. And I'm sure, knowing what I know about the business, that the brands who use them, it was probably someone 22 in that office who was like, listen, there's this girl. She just made our logo. We should put it in our thing. And not someone like sitting in a room, reading, Adweek.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get your thoughts quickly because you've been in so many places. I know you probably have battled through these conversations. And we had two amazing women on the podcast, Morgan and Sheena, from Jack in the Box, actually. And Morgan said a really interesting thing. And she said, sales overnight, brand over time. And I think the constant friction that I see in my spot as an agency or a partner is building a community the right way, the way Patagonia has done, right? Versus immediate ROI or call to action for sales. Why don't we just do paid media and just go direct to consumer and just go all lower funnel and never focus on upper funnel? So I'd love to see throughout your career and your different stops, how you've navigated that tough thing with, especially with C-suite and folks that don't get it.
So I'll tell you, I don't care. I'll just use their name. Like, it's been so long and I have a career, who cares? So like 2004 or 5, I was working in-house for Hot Topic and I was doing their social and copyright. It was everything. Social media wasn't a job at that time. It was called New Media.
I mean, Facebook just started, 05, right? 04.
Yeah, it was like, it was pretty late. Twitter was 07. And so it wasn't a full-time job, and so it might've been 06 when I was there. I'm trying to remember, but I was there several years. And our CFO came to me and was like, hey, my sister just invested in this restaurant chain called Native Foods. Could you help build their social strategy? And I was like, all right, I'm vegan, I'm down. And so I immediately ran into the problem that you're talking about, where they were so obsessed with competitors that had a ton of followers. And I went through the competitors' followers and I was like, these are fake.
Yeah.
I can tell by their engagement that they are buying these followers to have an inflated account so that they look important. And not every client's going to care about that, is what I learned. It sucks. Yeah. And so I kept saying to them that same thing, I just kept saying to them, you're going to build more brand equity if you really invest in building your brand the right way and looking for authentic follower growth. I mean, and when I was at Twitter, that was the same thing we would tell the talent when they would say to us, like, yo, I'm not getting booked at this festival because this person over here has 1 million Twitter followers, but like they're fake. And so I'm like, well, that's when you need to pull out your data and go show them your engagement and why, if you ask them for the receipts, they aren't going to be there. Yeah. And so it's really, to this day, it's about engagement over followers, but that is still something that I think a tough sell to people at the top.
I would say the majority of C-suite, all they care about is the vanity metric. Well, our competitor has 1 million. We only have 400,000. Yes. This is annoying, which is tough. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is like, that has not consistently changed, but I do think that'll evolve over time as folks like me, like enter these places.
Yes.
And as folks who have been in the social media drivers be like, no. Like, this is why. And also, nothing silences someone more than revenue, right? So if you can convert those clicks into meaningful revenue, then if they're seeing their numbers go up week over week, month over month, based off of your efforts, then they'd be stupid not to.
And what's so funny is like every piece of data that you analyze shows that if you spend money on upper funnel marketing first and then retarget the folks that actually interacted or enjoyed that content, you just get better Everything, right? So, I mean, we could talk about that all day. I do want to move on to an article you wrote actually back in December. And this actually came across my timeline too. I didn't put two and two together until we reached out to you and realized that you were the author behind it. But a great piece called The Great Resignation, The Great Exhaustion, which I joked with a colleague today. March 2020 seems like it was 2 months ago, but also 6 years ago. So I never quite know. But I have a couple quotes I wanted to ask you specifically on, but talk about that piece and what drove you to write that piece.
Yeah, I mean, my husband and I were in that bucket of people who had not had COVID, and we had done all the things. We were vaccinated, we were boosted. In fact, we were vaccine volunteers for the city of Long Beach to help people get vaccinated. And then, come December, and he had become kind of a hypochondriac. And I had gone through some job changes and stuff, and I was just whatever. And then he got Omicron, and like all our Christmas plans went out the window.
Yep.
And it was super exhausting. And I just remember sitting down at my computer because, I had changed jobs during the pandemic, like a lot of people. And I thought, I just thought it's not the Great Resignation. It's the Great Exhaustion, because I also do mentorship and life coaching and stuff. And I had so many clients coming to me that were just like, I'm burnt out. I need a change. And I started thinking to myself, do we though, or do we just need to rest? And do we need to say that out loud?
Right.
I think it was really amplified for me because of my experience at Amazon. The work culture there is pretty notoriously documented. It doesn't matter what division you're in. And I felt like I came to this crux of my life where I was like, okay, if I stay here, I'm choosing probably money over health.
Yeah.
Is that a trade-off I'm willing to make? And the answer was no.
Yep.
But I'm still recovering from that experience months and months and months later.
Interesting. I really, one of the lines in the article, I'll read it here, is my husband, who 10 days ago was rocking a fever and chugging down some Theraflu-like substance in between night sweats due to COVID-19, is concerned about his lack of productivity. But here's the thing, I get it, I feel it. I replied, yeah, I've been feeling the same way, but also, why do Americans have to be so damn productive all the time? I add the damn. But the point is, it's so true, right? Like, I think I even find myself, if I miss a workout or what have you, I just beat myself up all evening. You're such a piece of garbage. You should have worked out this evening. Or if I don't get enough emails done or don't, it just feels like we're constantly chasing this, impossible productivity goal. And I mean, until you wrote it out like that, I never really thought about that way, but that has to be just kind of, whether it's like grind time culture or whatever it is, people sharing on social media, the FOMO, whatever it may be, that's really been like beat into us, like especially our, I think, demographic.
I just had to Google this word that I was forgetting, but in Japan, they have a term karoshi, which means death by stress. And it was this phenomenon of men literally just like dropping dead on a subway, perfectly healthy men, just dropping dead from stress. And I remember once seeing this choir of women who were the widows of karoshi. And you just file that in the back of your head is like, well, that's an interesting cultural story. But man, what's happened, what I see happening in the States today, and this could be the case for a lot of first world countries, is like all of us have become assembly lines. It doesn't matter if you are like there was like one snarky comment on my piece, and it was like, well, talk to immigrants because da 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 da. And I normally don't engage with trolls, but I was like, well, actually, I'm the daughter of an undocumented immigrant and a refugee from a war-torn country. So
yeah,
I can just tell you that the exhaustion, it doesn't matter if you are blue collar or if you are white collar, although there are privilege dynamics that are different, right? There are certainly privilege dynamics that are different. But in some ways, I found my parents were better at resting than I was, because they would do little things like enjoy a trip to a taqueria or like go walk in the park or take time for themselves. And for myself, we become obsessed with these articles about morning routines and how many books we're reading. And like, my husband has COVID. It's December and I'm judging myself because I haven't finished the 4 books I am simultaneously trying to read so I can become, and what is beneath all of that, right? We don't think we're good enough. We don't think we're good enough. And we think we can constantly optimize ourselves. We can biohack ourselves with bulletproof coffee. We can learn more about marketing by reading the latest quantum marketing book from Raja, whatever it is. And the idea is that at some point, perfect becomes the enemy of good. I think it's a Voltaire quote. And I just feel that, I had a coach once say to me, what kind of manager are you when you're exhausted? And I was like, not a good one. What kind of creative work do you do when you're exhausted?
Yep.
So you have to fill your well, and it starts.
You know what I think it is too? I think it's like, it's the first generation that we're the tech age, right? We have this iPhone in our pocket and we're always reachable. And I think with our folks and our parents, right? They had the typewriter at the office. They got into their car at 5 p.m. and they drove home. And it's pretty rare, unless the boss went back into the office and picked up his rotary phone and called the director of whatever and said, hey, I want you to work on this while you're at home. It just wasn't even possible because you didn't have the tools to do that. But I think the fact that the laptop and the iPhone, although these are amazing things that probably have spearheaded your and I's career both, right? It also is like this always on where, I mean, it's unhealthy, but the second I wake up, I'm scrolling, checking my email, seeing if there's any updates from overnight. So yeah, I think it's like we're still battling. And as we have children too, it's like, how young should they have cell phones in their hands? And like, how can I teach them? Because we're really the guinea pigs of this entire social tech movement for sure.
Did you hear about the kid who was the QB? His name is Stetson from like the college football championship. Because it's a pretty wild story. So he was from the winning team, and one of his secrets to success for helping him prep for the year when people were counting him out.
All from Georgia.
Yeah. He switched to a flip phone midway through the year, like a dumb phone.
Yeah. So he couldn't get the trolls. Yeah.
Yeah. And people made fun of him, but he was like, I don't need anything except for text. I don't need social media. I was wasting time on it in the morning. And I was like, dang. I mean, for most of us, we can't do that if we work in this kind of line of work. But what we can do is carve out breaks. Like, listen, I had a huge pitch meeting with our entire C-suite today to this, big investor. And yesterday was an extremely intense day for me. It was like a, 17-hour day. And even last night at 5 o'clock, while my boss and I were going back and forth, and I said, just so you know, 6:30 to 7:30, I'm going to be D&D. And I went to a yoga nidra class, restorative yoga, before I got back into it and finished working. Because if I don't make that time for myself, no one else will. But I think a lot of us are afraid to ask for that time because of, will people think we're not good enough? And I think for myself as a manager, what I can say to folks is, as long as you put up results, I don't really care what time you take for yourself.
Have you heard of this revenge bedtime procrastination?
No.
So I read this article recently. It's when you like get home late or whatever, you worked a 17-hour day, and instead of like just going to bed and getting a full night's rest, you feel like I need some me time. So you watch the Netflix until 2 a.m. You kind of get in this vicious cycle, right? Where it's like you're kind of voluntarily depriving yourself of sleep because you want, that time to yourself, or like you just feel like you need to have an escape from work rather than just work to sleep. So it's very interesting, but that's also a thing too. That we deal with.
That is deep.
Revenge bedtime procrastination. Another thing too, I came across, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I've been sharing with my team the last year or so. There's this tweet that came across my timeline. Is that burnout, ADHD, the trauma of an ongoing pandemic, capitalism, climate crisis? Just kidding. It's all of those things. And the only answer I've got for us is go lay down. So pretty much what you said, right? Rest is the cure here. I think ultimately too, I noticed there's a famous story that I always tell. The San Diego Chargers lost one of their really good social media managers a couple of years ago. And within 5 days, they had 1,800 applicants. I'll do it for, a cheap wage, and I'll work 7 days a week. So that's also another thing we battle too, right? Is like, as a professional, you want to put up those boundaries, but there's always that younger, hungry, person that's willing to kind of like do unhealthy things. Because a lot of these corporations, even people that come to my company, where you have like mental health breaks and you can't work 7 days in a row and 4 weeks vacation, but they come from environments where that's the norm. Like, hey, I work 9 days in a row, or I work 12-hour days. It's just not productive.
God bless. My dog is snoring so loud right now. So if you hear it, just know that.
Do you have a Frenchie?
This is Eno. He's a Chihuahua Terrier.
Okay.
He's a chunky boy. No, I was putting in a bunch of requests to our art director this week, and she was just hustling even on days off. And I apologized and I said, look, take a makeup day off on Friday. And I sent her some cupcakes and a macaron. And she was like, oh, it's okay. I come from an agency. And I was like, yeah, but it's not. Like, I get it. We're a startup.
Yeah.
I would argue at my level, I think that kind of goes with the territory, right? Yep. Like, I don't have the luxury necessarily of like not working every weekend. Sometimes, I'm actually at the point where I'm sure you understand as an entrepreneur, like Saturday mornings can be a nice time to work because no one is on Slack.
Right.
But
also too, like, it's almost less stress to knock it out and not have to worry about it all weekend. Like, put in 3 hours. Like, I get that too, where it's like, I'm going to stress about it for 48 hours, or I could just knock it out now and then have a sigh of relief, which is kind of weird, right? Like, more stress equals less stress in a way.
I just think so much of an executive's day-to-day is on people management and not as much on strategy and execution, that I like to free up strategy time for when I feel rested and I'm not being bombarded.
Right.
I ruthlessly use Slack D&D, ruthlessly. And I've gotten that way on my phone now too. It's like, another thing I did on my phone was I coded all my folks with certain text tones. So I know if like, that's my boss, that's my husband, that's my friend. And then I can,
I started doing, and it's becoming like a therapy session, but I started doing half day Fridays last year. I've ran my company for 8.5, 9 years now. I'm like, you know what? It's time. Like, I got to let go. I have VPs now. But still, every time I walk out of the office, there's a little bit of guilt where I see my people still working, and do I deserve this? And I'm sure in their mind, they're like, you're the CEO, man. Like, you deserve it. Do your thing. But it's just, to your point, there's this weird culture where you kind of feel guilty for not grinding with all the folks on Twitter, so.
I know, which I just wipe my tweets regularly.
So to that point, I mean, being a leader now, like, what do you think? Like, there's a lot of leaders like you. There's a lot of folks that are going to be in leadership positions soon that are listening to the show. Like, how do we fix this? Like, how do people like you and I start to rewire the culture a little bit where there is like a good balance? People aren't, because like you said, the ideas of productivity, the efficiency, they all go away actually when you work people to death and you burn them out. So it's actually not good for business. And there's actually studies out there that show a 4-day work week can actually be more productive than a 5-day, all that stuff. So what can we do in your opinion?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, because I'm thinking about my team, and I did a pretty dramatic reorganization on my team over the past 3 months, which is hard. It's really hard to do that. And to me, as a leader, the first thing you need to do, and this is going to sound really counterintuitive, but let me do a quick name drop. This was my one name drop for this. I won't do it again. I once asked Jack Dorsey, not long after I left Twitter, because he still follows me for some reason I don't understand. But every now and then we'll DM, and I asked him like, hey, give me a good leadership book to read. And he told me The Score Will Take Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, who built the San Francisco 49ers team, which as a Southern Californian pains my soul because I hate Bay Area teams, but whatever. Anyway, but that book it actually really made an impact on me, because one of the things he talked about that sounds so after the fact, but is that when he got there, the first thing he did was establish protocols and decorum. Like, you will wear suits to the game. For the front desk folks, it was, you're going to dress nice and you're going to answer the phone saying this, and we are going to practice on these days. And these are going to be like the results we go after. And the takeaway was that even they started winning more, and it wasn't like overnight, but when they finally started qualifying for the Super Bowl, they would not train differently, because the score will take care of itself if you've established the right protocols. And so what I do with my team is a bit intense up front, but once it starts firing and folks start winning, they get it. And that is that I established protocols. Like everything we do is going to be based off strategy. And it is going to ladder up to really clear KPIs and results, because winning is fun. It's really easy for us, especially CMOs or creatives who are creatives, to be like, oh, let's just have fun and like whatever. And like, I love it, but you want to show how you are crushing it in the data and in the revenue and driving actionable results, because that will make a team really happy. And then keep your team honest.
Yeah.
Like, put really clear guidelines in front of them so that they know what the strategy is and they're not trying to guess, and be willing as a leader to have a backbone and be willing to, sometimes they might not like something you're doing, but they will respect that you care about results. And then balance that with empathy. After I led 2 months of a really intense series of changes, which involved restructure and layoffs and hires, et cetera, I took my entire team, this was before Omicron dropped, but I took my entire team to Palm Springs, and we did an offsite where we had a bunch of fun. And I invited my friend Sonam Obsession, who works for Conan O'Brien and is on the team.
Yeah. I love her. Yeah.
So I had her come speak to the team, and they got to go out and have like hangout time at the bar by themselves. That's without a boss in the room.
Yeah.
Like, and also I would say, like, empower your team. One of my lessons with this squad has been to ask them for feedback in our meetings, and like have them tag folks to speak. Mm-hmm. Because if I just go, hey, does anyone have a suggestion? It's like,
nope,
20 crickets looking at me.
Yeah.
But if I go I'm going to tag you and then tag someone else.
Yeah.
So that's really like, build around results, but balance it with empathy and encourage folks to, make sure they understand what your vision of success is, but encourage folks to be team players and cross-functional support groups. Cause like, I think that one of the things I see with this younger gen, and I certainly don't want to generalize, and this is not everybody, but sometimes there is too much of an emphasis on gaining power and not on driving results. And it's like, what I want to say is like, if you drive results, you will naturally get the promotion. You don't just get a promotion because you've been somewhere 2 years. That's not how it works.
I love the line too. Like, if you make yourself replaceable, you become irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Because you've built the system and the processes, and you built the entire team. And it's like, that's, I think a lot of people don't think that way. They think I have to hoard all the work and I have to be irreplaceable in that way. And it's like, actually, you're a huge liability for the company.
Oh, completely.
Because I can't replace you. I read similar to you, I read a book called The Great Game of Business. And the big thing they teach is it's really hard to play a game when you don't know the scoreboard. Yes. So I think for leaders, it's like, what are our goals? How are we tracking? Are we behind? Are we on track? All those different things. So, as much as you can share, some private companies like won't allow you to share revenue or sales or whatever. But I mean, it's hard to get invested into a company when you don't really know if your work is actually performing, right? So, and then one other thing that I learned a couple of years ago is, just to kind of provide some value for the listeners here, is every week, every employee on my team, we ask them, how's your emotional, physical, and mental health from 1 to 10? And when you start doing that, it's really interesting, because my emotional health is at a 1 because my grandmother died this week. Wow. Okay, we should to keep an eye. How can we help you? How can we support you? Do you need some time off? But I think if you ask those questions, like you said, with empathy, you'll start to get some feedback there where you can actually make adjustments. And they know that you care, and they know they can go to you. Because I mean, there's nothing worse than your grandmother dying than being asked to work a 70-hour week 9 days in a row. Like that's when it becomes too much, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like to ask those kind of questions one-on-one. I've learned not to do it in a group setting because I've had it.
Yeah.
Privacy. But I will say that it's important to remember that we manage people and not robots. And I would say this on the other side, I don't think many employees realize that we're also people, like one of the things that was the biggest shift in my thinking as I went from employee to manager was, as the employee, you're obsessed with your slice of the pie. And when you go talk to your boss, you're just thinking about your slice of the pie. But you're not realizing that they have an entirely, like they have 3 pies.
Yeah.
They have you, They have all the 19 people under them. They have their boss. They have all the other executives. They have all these cross-functional stuff. They have these randos who might be offended at them, like for this and that. And you don't know everything that's going on along. Like I had, when we went back to work on January 3rd, I had just had 2 weeks of all Christmas holiday stuff bombed because of my husband's COVID. My car broke down and I got a $3,400 bill. We had 3 weeks of rain and my window in our dining room basically busted and we were having like floods in our windows. We're going to have to rip off our whole floor. And then we had to start gunning towards some big, internal finance cap stuff, whatever, that I could not disclose to my team. And so, there was, that's why they kind of say leadership can be lonely, but it's like, I would just love for folks out there who sometimes are like, my boss is that, just keep in mind that they may not be telling you the whole story because they can't sometimes.
Exactly.
They're people.
Yep. 100%. I also love, and I've always joked about this with kind of friends and colleagues. You mentioned in your article, to kind of put a bow on this whole thing, job announcements are now 3 paragraphs long. I've always joked about that. Like, why does every time someone moves jobs on Twitter has to be a eulogy of a 19 thread tweet? I mean, you want to thank the people that did you right and supported you and mentored you, but like it's becoming, people are making graphics now with jersey swaps, and it's just like, it's a lot. So, do you think that adds into kind of like, I don't know, like some of what you're talking about, where it's all about, I don't know, puffing your chest down and getting better jobs and moving and just like, I don't know if that's part of kind of that rest thing you were talking about too.
Okay. I'm going to spit, you're about to get the Tatiana. I'm going to spit some game. So, I used to do that kind of stuff. I do not anymore. In fact, I didn't announce this job for 2 months after I got it. I quietly changed my LinkedIn over Christmas and I did not notify my network. So to this day, many of my friends don't even know I'm at this company.
Yeah.
And I was, like hanging out with Sean Parker and doing all kinds of stuff. Yeah. The paper looks great, right? The reason I don't do any of that anymore, or like retweet my own press is, I had this reckoning, this like existential moment when I was at Amazon. And I felt like you get to this point in your career where you keep chasing title after title after title after title after title. And it's sort of like someone who makes it to the top and like wins an Oscar and they're still unhappy, or they make that first million, they're unhappy. And like, in my career, I've worked for some very famous people and I've met several billionaires and they're not all happy.
Yeah.
And so what happened for me was I started to realize it was dangerous for my identity to be too linked to my job, because then what happens is when I leave that job, is my identity impacted? And then I started going, whoa, is my identity defined by my title, by my importance, by what I do?
Yep.
And it's a weird thing to say as someone whose resume is pretty lit. And I decided that I needed to have a real soul searching moment and determine who I was outside of, I'm just a child of God. Like, let me just break it down, keep it simple. And I don't need to like get all crazy on everything else. Like, I'm just a person. I'm no better than a server at a restaurant or, a billionaire tech founder. I just need to be a person. And then the moment I did that and I surrendered that, it's like this tremendous freedom. So
I think entrepreneurs do this a lot too, right? Where it's like you're constantly defining yourself with other entrepreneurs. How many employees do you have? How much revenue? How much sales? And I think salespeople get this too, right? You hit your sales goal on the quarter, you're excited for 24 hours, and you got to build back that mountain up again, right? So it's like you never celebrate the wins, and you got a director promotion, great.
Yeah.
3 days later, you want to be a VP. It's like you're just you're looking for the fear of missing out type thing. So it's so true. And I think if people would look back, and I've done a lot of work on this last couple of years too. So it's funny you mentioned it, but being thankful and just like, wow, like how far we've came and all the things that, you manifested came to reality, rather than like, but we still don't have this, or but we're still not as good as that. Cause that can be a tough thing to always have on your brain.
And that goes back to that, like top of the podcast, to that idea of like, I'm not good enough, because what happens is you start realizing that it's a drug, and that no matter what you get, the next thing is like still not going to fill the hole. And so I heard this, I'll be real quick, but I heard this amazing podcast probably 10 or 12 years ago with Oprah and Eckhart Tolle, where it was around his book, The Power of Now. And this person called in and was like, well, I really want to be an actor. They were like calling from someplace in West Hollywood. And they were like, I really want to be an actor. It's not working out for me to be an actor. And if I'm not going to be an actor, I don't know how I can accept that in my life. And like Oprah said something to this person that like knocked my socks off. She said, that's not actually true. Because if you wanted to be an actor, you could go to Colorado and be in community theater and probably run a theater and do acting, very happy. But what you want is fame. And what you actually want is an increased sense of self-esteem and confidence. And you will not get that from being an actor. And that blew me away. And it's so true. Even today, it's like what we think we want is actually a mask for what our motivations are. Like, what are my motivations? What I might actually be looking for is validation. And I might not even need that through work. I might be able to get that from somewhere else. So I got super existential on you.
No, and I think too, like that's the whole thing with especially young women and Instagram followers and likes and TikTok and all that stuff too. Like it's definitely something that, that validation, that constant dopamine hit of I'm good enough or I'm cute enough or whatever it may be. So,
oh my gosh, can we just talk about like, let me give you my rant on Instagram influencers. You have the ones who like make themselves overly perfect. And then now there's this pendulum swing where there's girls using filters to enhance their cellulite. So it looks worse.
I didn't know that. I learned something today.
Oh yeah. And I'm over here and I'm just like, oh my gosh, folks, come on. Just tone it down.
Blame the Kardashians. All right. So I want to talk about your time over at Nielsen. You said a really interesting thought, which was marketers need to provide sales or data or both, which is kind of like a huge thing that I always make sure that we talk about as well. But I mean, speak about, I guess, your learnings from that, maybe at Nielsen, or just always understanding that when it comes to what we're doing as marketers.
Yeah. I mean, I think that data has been so strongly emphasized in the last decade. And I think that, there's all these amazing tools now like Mixpanel and, everything else that everyone can use to get really deep on data. And so at the time I went to Nielsen in 2013, it was thinking about how in the world of sponsorships, brands just chose whatever artist they like because it was like, my daughter likes Katy Perry. Let's go do a deal. They had no idea if it was actually better for Pepsi or not. It was just do the deal, right?
Yep.
But there were actually ways we could use different tools and create tools to make an impact on the business. And one example was myself and our head of analytics, Julian Schiffer, came up with this tool called the EDM study, where we broke down the demographics of the EDM market in 2013. And one of the things we were able to take to clients was demographic data that said all of your ads are white, but you are missing the fact that like 29% of the EDM audience is Latinx. Mm-hmm. And this is an opportunity for you to actually target the right demo, but you're not doing that.
Right.
And it was a way that you could use data to inform their storytelling. And my big speech as a marketer these days is quantitative is not enough. You have to marry it with meaningful qualitative that moves at the speed of culture in order to drive an impact. Because if you just try to do strictly data, you will end up with a brand that lacks a soul. And maybe that's okay if you're like a finance company, right? But if you're trying to impact culture, let's say I'm assuming most of your clients are targeting millennials and Gen Z, right?
Yep.
They are going to need this combination of meaningful data with a really powerful story that will resonate with the audience. And it's you folks being able to go, oh, you know what? They don't actually like memes. They like it more when we get engaged with them and ask them questions.
Yep.
And we're creating this whole story about altruism and, body positivity or whatever it is. And so that's really my thing right now is like, we need to go back to this. We went from being like Don Draper marketing to just like robots.
Yeah.
And that was because a bunch of finance people made it like the Bible. And I think a lot of Ryan Holiday's marketing thoughts got really quant, and Raja Rajamanar is probably the king of that. But I think that we're in a place now And by God, we need more women marketers because there's like no books in that space written by women. Like I love me some Seth Godin, but like, let's talk Seth Godin, Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. Maybe Sheryl Sandberg, but she's more on the tech side.
She is more on the tech side, but I'll take it. But it's just like, but you know, it's really about combine your storytelling with data to make a difference. If you're trying to impact, you know, youth culture, you know, who I think kills it is Chewy. Their customer journey is so interesting that if you call them to cancel an order because your pet has passed away, they send flowers.
Wow.
Like that is amazing. And then what happens is those people share it on social media and say, wow, I couldn't believe this, da, 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 da. And so to me, that is that like sort of, that's not a data-driven approach, right? That is a heart-centered storytelling, like thoughtful, human-centered approach to marketing that I feel in some ways we kind of lost the last 5-10 years. And I think folks that are killing the game right now are those who are bringing it back.
I've also talked to some clients too, or some prospects that have done a really good job direct to consumer and, you know, lower funnel, but they never built a brand. So they wake up 6 years later, like now they come to us like, we want to build a community. Like we're doing well. We get a lot of sales, but nobody gives a shit about our brand. It's not a lifestyle company. We don't have ambassadors. People aren't like talking about us online. And I think, you know, if you can do both simultaneously, obviously you'll be in a much better spot.
Well, let me stop and give you guys some props because I had found your account like last year when I was like, I need to freshen up my skills. I have time off. So I was like, I want to find who I think are the cool marketing companies in the space right now. And so many of these Instagram accounts were like straight up spam. And STN was one of the only ones I found that it was like colorful. It had a point of view, personality. You met the people behind the company.
Thank you.
And it really impressed me. Like the marketing was killer. It was really smart. And I was like, oh, I should know these people. Awesome. But when this opportunity came my way, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Synchronicity.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, honestly, to be transparent, like early on in our company, we were selling social, but we were so busy, we didn't even do our own social correctly, right? So that you get into that situation sometimes too. You mentioned it's okay to fail hard as a marketer. What do you mean by that?
So this came from my friend Erin Keneally, who was one of the first 300 at Facebook. And she told me how, and so it was like probably 10, 15 years ago, we were having a conversation and she was talking about how, not 15 because they haven't been around 15, but like she was telling me how they had a motto internally in the early days that was fail harder. And I think that when you get to the point as a marketer where everything is a hit every time is your goal, your goals aren't big enough.
Yep.
You need to try some stuff and have it totally fail. And maybe 50% fail so that you can look at that strategy and go, okay, this part and this part was great, but let's change these two things.
Great. So I wanted to kind of get some rapid fire questions here as we wrap up the show. It's been a great conversation. Here we go.
Okay, I'm scared.
You've already talked about a few of them like Chewy, but brands, accounts, creators that you enjoy following on social that do a good job and or inspire you.
I love Emily Zugay. I love Preachers and Sneakers on Instagram. Benny Drama 7, the absolute GOAT of marketing and branding today, in my opinion, is Unique Gibson, who created Because of Them We Can and The Black Man Can. Oh my goodness. She is a genius entrepreneur, will probably be a billionaire one day. She even created the game Culture Tags, which is now carried at Target. Her Instagram accounts are just like absolutely amazing. I do love that Emily Zugay account because it was just, a lot of the TikTok culture started becoming about perfection and then like, silly dances. And this gal just, it was basically like throws Comic Sans on a paper and we go. I did like that Apple spot quite a bit that was created. I thought it was pretty genius. We're working with an agency called The Working Assembly, and they did all the brand creative for the Museum of Ice Cream, which I loved. And I thought that was tremendously awesome.
Awesome. I wonder what Sean thinks about this and you as well. Because, Instagram pretty famously would not have a Twitter account for a while, right? And they recently hopped on that train. So when you're building another quote unquote rival social network, when you kind of lay out that marketing strategy, are you jumping on the main, obviously the YouTubes of the world, but also Twitter, Instagram, Facebook? Do you just do you have to park everywhere, or is there kind of like a little bit of, I don't know, competitiveness there?
I mean, I listen, I think you go grab your user handle just for, brand management purposes. Whether you deploy it depends on how well you kill a couple channels first. I will say this, in the early days of Twitter, we used to have cardification from Instagram links enabled.
Yes,
if you shared from Instagram to Twitter, and then when conversations fell apart between Twitter and Instagram, that went away, which still pains me to this day.
Did I see something recently though that they kind of have better integration now? I'm not sure, but I think
I should check. I don't remember seeing it change, but I will say the irony of that is those two platforms are nothing alike.
Right.
Nothing alike.
Yeah.
And so, these days I sort of feel like a lot of my friends in the space work for other big platforms. Like I know friends at TikTok and Clubhouse and Facebook. I don't view anyone as a rival.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, go thrive. I'm doing my thing. You're doing your thing. We can all win.
There's enough for all of us to eat. I agree.
Right. It's like when we're all football teams, whatever. It's like, you go to the playoffs, like, okay, maybe one team wins a Super Bowl, but it doesn't mean the other 7 teams are.
They're still selling out every game.
They're still doing great, right?
Yeah. What are some of the best campaigns you've seen or personally been a part of through your different stops in your career?
I created a campaign for Alicia Keys when I was at Twitter that I really loved. And it was one of those things where I wish it would have gone 100% of the way I wanted it to go, but I got 75%. And it was called hashtag Alicia Dedicates.
Okay.
And it was her team had come to us wanting to find a way to drive follower growth during her tour. And, our partnerships team was really positioned as like, we're the concierge service for talent, whatever. And so I created this campaign where the idea was she would tweet, be sure you're following me if you're going to my show in 2 days, and tell me why I should dedicate a song to you along with your section, row, and seat number. And then every night she would be like, okay, Jaleesa out in section, baby girl, you just lost your grandma. A spotlight would go on the girl. The girl starts freaking out. Yeah. And like you created this incredible moment. And then what we did was we kind of did a rinse and repeat with Enrique Iglesias, where he did a similar campaign and you would win a backstage meet and greet. And I had created this tagline, which was Twitter, we're the next best thing to backstage, because it was this idea where maybe you can't get to their show, but if your favorite artist replies you, that'll be just as exciting. Yeah,
that's the equivalent of an autograph back in art when we were kids, right? Yeah.
So that to me is a campaign that came to life because, so many don't come to life that I was.
That's awesome.
So stoked to see happen because fans were so awesome, so freaking out.
Where do you think the undervalued attention on social is right now?
Pinterest. And I know that
78% women.
Yeah, I know that's a weird thing to say, but in a day and age where so much social makes us feel bad, Pinterest makes you feel great.
I will say that too, like with TikTok, I find myself with my algorithm anyway. I'm more educated. I learn more things. I laugh more than Instagram, where Instagram feels like just a empty abyss sometimes, where me and my producer Will actually talk about it all the time. Like, at least on TikTok, you may be wasting time, but you're learning a new recipe or how to make something or whatever. So that's, I agree.
I think it's kind of a dark horse to mention, but I judge social platforms to me by how I feel when I exit them. And I never feel bad leaving Pinterest. I think there's so much. And another plug. No one would consider this a social platform, but I do. The Insight Timer meditation app.
Okay.
So it's a meditation app and it has a community with social functions in it. And they've added a bunch of product features ranging from live speakers now. Their UX shows you everyone who's meditating around the world.
Oh, wow.
With all the meditators. And after you meditate, you'll get little messages. They're like, thanks for meditating with me. And it's like someone in Johannesburg. Thanks for meditating with me. And to me,
and you said it's called Insight Meditation. What's it called?
Insight Timer.
Okay, Insight Timer.
Insight Timer. It's free. I pay their $60-something a year subscription fee so I can get access to courses. So like right now I'm listening to a course on rest and burnout. And I learned that there's a difference between leisure and rest. So watching TV, reading, or hiking aren't actually rest because they stimulate your brain too much.
Yeah.
So I find that app as sort of like a social app that no one's really thinking about as social. But I do think that we're going to see, I hope a meditation app becomes a big social platform.
Yeah, for sure. What are some tools or resources or apps that you use like daily in your work life that just makes your life easier?
I mean, I feel like our analytics team is the best. Our team runs everything off of Monday. Which is like an Asana competitor. So our project manager, Chloe, uses that. And then internally, I feel like it's a lot of the usual suspects. It's Mixpanel, it's Looker, Sprout. I will actually say, I don't think social moderation is as good as it should be right now. And it's a big bone to pick. Like also,
all the analytical tools, they all do something really, really well, but they're all different things. So they there's no one size fits all. You have to have like 14 different things.
Yeah. I'm just like I was using Hootsuite like 15 years ago. Like I feel like there's room to disrupt in the social space because like between Sprout and Sprinkler and Hootsuite and whatever, I'm still not sold on any, like people always call me for that. Like, what do you recommend? And I'm like,
And the salespeople always like sell you the dream. And once you get in it, you're like, ugh, it has so many holes. Yeah.
I mean, yes. It's like they don't actually use social media themselves.
All right. So finally, I'll end with this. Like, what's your biggest piece of advice for someone like you, right? Like they want to get to that CMO level. They want to have that career trajectory that you have. Like, what's the biggest thing you've learned through your career so far?
Find a way to make your boss happy because that's the only person whose opinion of you matters. I mean, to be honest, I felt like early in my career, I was always trying to rebel a lot. And it's not that you can't disagree, but you have to balance that. Focus on results, learn how to sell yourself. I think, for women, and I'm a woman of color, it is especially like Latinx folks, you're kind of raised in this culture of like, stay quiet, just INS or whatever. Yep. And like, so the idea of going to work and hyping yourself up is very counterintuitive to who you are. And yet it is incredibly critical to growing your career. Oh, but the distinction I want to clarify with is talk about your real results, not fake it till you make it results.
Right.
Because people like you and I can see through these kids that are trying to like finesse something and it's like smoke and mirrors because we've been there, done that. So trust that experts know when you're trying to finesse them and really like talk about your real results. I did like a gal, Melanie on my team, got a community over on our app this weekend. And she was like, she was able to articulate like, yeah, this is what I did. I told them like, oh, we're going to go over here now because we can do it on video, which will be more fun for our playlisting and just use this link. And I just made it super casual and didn't mention onboarding or anything. And they just figured it out and joined.
Yeah.
And she just like did it on a whim and it worked, but she could articulate what she did. And then we were able to link it to a DAU spike in the product on the other side of that. And that to me is a perfect example of like, she was able to own her story and hype what she did in front of a exec meeting. And there was data to back it up. And it wasn't,
I love it,
inflated. It was real.
It's funny you mentioned that. I just had a really great conversation today with one of my directors. And I think there's also like, it goes back to the other generation, right? People of color, a lot of parents are like, you better be thankful you have a job, right? Don't ruffle anybody's feathers. Don't sit there and ask for some stupid raise. Like you're about to get fired if you try to do that. Like, and I think that unfortunately is kind of built into the next generation. And it's unfortunate because like you said, you have to kind of put that deck together and ask for that promotion, ask for that raise, especially women, people of color. But there's been kind of this like culture where it's like, I don't want to like ruffle anybody's feathers, which, I think
when I got the job at Twitter, someone in my family said to me, because I was like, I got this job. I'm going from Disney to Twitter. I'm getting a big pay bump. And someone in my family, which I feel like only immigrant kids will relate to, is like, they were like, Tatiana does not mean, more responsibility is not always good, Tatiana.
Wow.
And I was just like,
interesting.
No, I was like, my other friends' parents would be like, yes, more money, go. But like my fam was like, don't mess up the bag you already have.
Right. And also I'm sure you got that with Amazon too. It's like, why would you leave the biggest company? Like, don't do that. That's silly. Like you're good. I bet.
I had someone once say to me, are people going to think I can't hack it? And if I leave, and I'm like, Who cares what quote unquote people think?
Yeah.
And so I actually felt liberated. I was like, let's go. But I think, for anyone out there that's in a toxic situation and toxic because of the environment, not toxic because you're not doing your job and someone's asking you to, because that's not toxic. That's just you not doing your job. Amen. But like, if it is truly toxic, just leave. There's a lot of parallels between toxic relationships and toxic jobs. And then once you date a nice person, you're like, oh,
right.
I was settling before.
Yeah.
And it's a job seeker's market. As a hiring manager, I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hire people right now.
Yeah, especially if you're a marketer, like make sure you're marketing yourself, right? Like how's your LinkedIn looking and your resume, and like how do you present yourself to your current boss and also your potential future boss? All that stuff definitely matters at the end of the day. So, well, Tatiana, like I said, never met a Tatiana I don't like, and that is true today as well. So. We'll have to do it again sometime. Where are you based at? Are you LA? I don't think I asked you.
Yeah, I'm in Long Beach. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm headed that way up next month or so. We'll have to grab some lunch or something. But I'm so glad we got connected, and thanks for all your kind words about ST and all those things too. We appreciate it.
Very impressed.
Thank you.
You all are killing it, and it was an honor to be asked to.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll talk soon. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Another great show. Will, thanks so much for setting it up. Tatiana Simonian, the CMO over at Airtime. Wow, Will, we got into a lot of deep therapy type questions there. I found myself sharing some deep thoughts myself, and we just kind of lost ourselves into what is social media and the marketing world.
Yeah, I mean, you want to talk about an hour that covers a broad spectrum from philosophy to work best practices to leadership to marketing skills. You guys hit it all.
And I find bad sometimes, I feel bad sometimes because I'll ask a question and then I add my personal thought. But I do think when I do that, I'm just trying to add value to the listener as well, because she said something that, again, Will, you've been a part of that, right? We've been tracking mental, emotional, physical health for the last 3 years or so. And for you, right? I mean, as an employee, you could probably speak to this. It almost becomes second nature, where before maybe it was a little awkward to share that with your boss. But now it's kind of just like what you do. And if it's a little low, reach out, see what's up. But, I think just like checking in with your team and making sure they feel supported is such a huge part of this new age.
Yeah, I think like she said, you kind of have to lead by example. Because, from my own perspective, like I would always write like, oh, I'm a 10 out of 10, right? Like I don't want anyone to think that I'm doing bad. And just this last week, I was like, hey, I'm a little lower. I'm kind of burnt out. Like I've got a lot of stuff going on. And it feels good to actually write that because people can't read your mind. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I love that so much. They can't read your mind. So, but if you tell your manager that and they do nothing or say, suck it up, then that's where she talked about later. Right, maybe in a toxic environment, you got to move on to somebody. Because at the end of the day, there's a job out there that will care for you and look out for you and have your best interest in heart.
A question for your great marketing mind.
Of course.
What are your thoughts?
One time Will Kelly called me a social media expert about 6 months ago.
Still true to this day.
Appreciate it.
I think the concept of airtime is really interesting in the sense that she said you have to participate. You have to engage. You can't just get on there and kind of scroll until you're done or until something else catches your eye. It is very much, it has to get rid of digital loneliness, I believe was the term she used.
Right.
Is that, I think that's an interesting concept. I don't know if it'll catch on, but I like the thought process of it.
I'm just amazed that Sean Parker still like gets up every morning wanting to start brand new companies. I mean, geez. I mean, the guy could have like called it a day after he started Napster, and then he's like, let me go help Zuckerberg with Facebook. He just keeps on keeping on. So, I'm not going to deny anything that guy's trying to do, because those guys, Dorsey and Zuckerberg and Parker, they seem like they know what's gonna be the thing a couple years from now. At face value, it seems hard if you're trying to like not force people, but like she said, everybody can win. And also there's always like being a Reddit fan, right? Like the difference from Reddit to Instagram to TikTok to Clubhouse are such different environments, and there's really something for everybody.
I really liked her analogy on that. Like not everybody has to be the greatest app in the world. Like they can all be good.
And again, like Twitter wants to fight with Instagram, but nobody's like I don't like Instagram anymore, so I'm going to Twitter. Like, I think that if you look at data on that, just two different platforms. Now, Instagram Reels versus TikTok. I mean, geez, this is a carbon copy.
That's a war.
So those are competitors for sure. But anyways, very interesting conversation with Tatiana. I'm excited to kind of continue our relationship going forward, and because just a lot of knowledge there, and I think she's really speaking from the heart when it comes to. I like what we talked about there at the end too, like people of color and making sure that those folks have a voice and we're supporting them as well. So thanks again, Will. Another good get. Thanks so much to David Furker for all his help. Of course, producer Will. Will, have we got the @ producer Will handle yet? Or is there any movement on Twitter?
No, I'll have an update for you in the next
maybe
episode,
TikTok. Maybe nobody's got, maybe I have a beatbox.
I'm more of a lurker on TikTok. Not a lot of content coming from my handle.
Got it. All right. So thanks so much for your guys' help. Thank you so much for listening. We are on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We would appreciate those 5-star reviews if you guys find value this show. That's absolutely free. So yeah, there we go. That's the end of the podcast. As always, this has been powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. This has been yet another edition of The Boss Business of Social.